Thanks for coming out this morning. My name is James Albus. I'm a state representative from East Haven and a recently elected co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. We are here today to talk about three bills that we are introducing today. Those bills are raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, implementing a paid family medical leave program in the state of Connecticut, and regulating the adult use of marijuana here in the state of Connecticut. And we feel like these are three really important bills. They're bills that have been discussed and worked on and debated for a number of years and have not yet been able to get passed into law here in Connecticut. And we feel like we have a good shot to do so this year. We have a governor who spoke about these issues on the campaign trail. We have a lot of new members who are really energized to get these issues done. And frankly, these aren't issues that are left or right or Democrat or Republican issues. These are issues that are supported by the public with 60 to 70% level of support. So we think that it is vital that we start the conversation about these important issues now. I want to talk about why these issues are so important. And let me first say, paid family medical leave is an issue that a number of legislators have been working on for a number of years. And I want to recognize some of the folks that have been doing that, folks like Senator May Flexer, Senator-elect Matt Lesser, Robin Porter, state representative who was hoping to be here this morning but was held up in Bridgeport at an event. They've put their heart and soul into this issue because it really benefits residents in the state of Connecticut. It will benefit our economy. It can lift families out of poverty. It can help small businesses. It can lower costs for the state of Connecticut. And frankly, now that Connecticut is the only state in our region, we're surrounded by states that provide a paid family medical leave program. Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, New Jersey, they all have a paid family medical leave program in place to help the workers in their state. 38% of millennial workers are willing to move to another state or country to have an opportunity to access a program like paid family medical leave. We need to implement this to ensure that we're remaining competitive with other states. Raising the minimum wage. I know that I stood in front of many of you 2 years ago with many of the folks here and several other legislators to talk about the necessity to raise our minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I want to repeat some of the statistics that I brought forward 2 years ago. Although men are a larger share of the overall U.S. workforce, most workers affected by raising the minimum wage are women, 55%. A minimum wage increase would disproportionately raise wages for people of color. For example, blacks make up 12.2% of the workforce, but 16.7% of affected workers. The disproportionate impact means that 40% of black workers and 33% of Hispanic workers would directly or indirectly get a raise from raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Of workers who would receive a raise, 2/3 work full-time, half have some college experience, and more than a quarter have children. So the minimum wage is not something that we might traditionally think of where it's being paid to a teenager on a summer job. These are real people who have families, who have college experience, who need a leg up in this economy. And we might hear about some of the concerns about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But the city of Seattle raised its minimum wage to $15 an hour in January 2017. Since then, what they found is that wages have increased across the board. Unemployment has decreased. The total number of hours worked is up, meaning that employers aren't cutting hours to account for higher minimum wage. And this was true even in the restaurant industry, which typically employs a lot of minimum wage workers. So I think it's a really important policy that we can do. And when we talk about regulating the adult use of marijuana, I really want to credit Representative Juan Candelaria for bringing this issue forward several years ago and being a champion on it. He could not join us this morning because he is on his way to the National Hispanic Caucus Conference in California, but I know that he has put a lot of work and effort into this and would have loved to be here if he could. But I can't think of another bill that we could pass in the next year or two that would create more jobs in as quick a time frame as regulating the adult use of marijuana. Massachusetts has just implemented their program. Their doors are open. They're seeing a lot of economic activity. And what we're really talking about is eliminating a black market and creating a new industry for people in Connecticut. We're talking about treating people fairly for past drug offenses, for having a small amount of marijuana and being arrested for that. We're talking about economic development. And so that's why I think it's really important that we're out here talking about these issues very early on. I want to recognize some of my colleagues that are here today, Representative Phil Young, Representative Mike Winkler, Representative Roland Lamar, Representative Pat Dillon, Representative Kim Rose, Representative Joshua Hall, Representative Josh Elliott, and so a couple new folks, Representative Quentin Phipps, Representative Gary Turco, Representative Greg Haddad, and Representative Susan Johnson. So thank you all for joining us today, and I'd like to turn it over to Joshua Hall for a few comments.
Thanks, Representative Albus. Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Joshua Hall. I represent the 7th District here in Hartford. And I just wanted to make a few general comments. I think James did an excellent job outlining the issues that we're all here to support this morning. I just want to try to dispel one of the, I think, narratives that was created as a result of the 2018 election. There seems to be that, folks want to allude that our results were due to something that's happening in Washington, D.C. I just want to credit the efforts of so many of our new colleagues and our current colleagues who went out there and knocked doors, made phone calls, and talked to voters one-on-one and impressed upon them, these are the values that we stand by, and these are the things that we want to make sure happen in the state of Connecticut and for the people of Connecticut and all the other stakeholders that made those efforts true. And so I want to thank everyone for those efforts. And so we know that as far as the minimum wage is concerned, we're talking about giving people an immediate raise. And we know that that builds economic uplift, not only in our cities, but throughout the state of Connecticut. And earned family medical leave, that's the key piece. It's not paid, right? It's people earning that time, making sure that they're putting in their own money to earn that time. That's a critical piece. But also about the adult use of marijuana. We know that this war on drug has exposed and disproportionately impacted communities of color for far too long. And we're trying to take that negative stigma away. But more importantly, that when it does become legal, because ultimately it is going to become legal here in the state of Connecticut, we want to make sure that those communities that were impacted so dramatically by this drug war, that they find some economic uplift as a result of that. So we want to make sure there's social equity built into this legislation to ensure that our black and brown brothers and sisters who are negatively impacted by this legislation get some uplift as a result of that. So I want to thank my colleagues who are here today to talk about and present these issues to you all, and we'll take questions if you have any.
So how do you, obviously the business community was against two of the proposals, the paid family medical leave and the increase in minimum wage. How do you get the business community on board?
Well, I think what we need to remember is that these are issues that are positive. They're going to have positive effects for workers and for the economy overall. If you're putting more money in people's pockets with a higher minimum wage, they're going to go out and spend it in their communities. A paid family medical leave program, looking at the proposals from last year, there's a minimal burden on the employers. It's employee paid, and in many cases, businesses will actually support it. There was a poll done last year that showed that 70% of small businesses support the state of Connecticut employing a paid family medical leave program. So I think they're there on that issue, and with minimum wage, I know that there are many companies across the country that have already increased their wages to at least $15 an hour because they recognize that that is not even a living wage in many places, and certainly not here in Connecticut. So I think that we have a lot of folks in the business community that are already there.
Is there something though that you can offer them, some sort of promise of, I'm not going to change these regulations for this period of time, something, not a tax credit or anything, but just, I promise not to change this part of
I think we could have that conversation going forward, and look, I don't know that we'll necessarily be the only ones talking about these issues, so I want to make sure that we're being inclusive of everybody who's going to be pushing for these issues going forward, so happy to have those types of conversations.
Got here a little late on the minimum wage. Can you give us an idea, those of us who are latecomers that we did, what are you talking about? What increments do you envision? Would you seek to again index the wage so that we no longer have to vote on it?
So what we are going to put forward today is a bill that would increase the minimum wage in steps from $10.10, where it is now, to $15 an hour over 4.5 years, and get to 15 on January 1st of 2023, and that would put us right in line with Massachusetts, which has already passed a $15 minimum wage. And then we're also proposing to index to inflation at that point.
Theirs going on that same schedule?
Theirs is going on roughly the same schedule. I don't recall their exact numbers off the top of my head, but they get to 15 at the same exact time.
That was part of a so-called grand bargain where they did pay family sick days at the same time. You said this is going to be, as been proposed before here, employee funded, right? How long would it take to spin this out? Massachusetts, they're going to start imposing payroll tax next year with a goal of, I guess, 2 years after that of actually having benefits available. So how would it work here?
Well, the bill that we're going to be proposing is very broad. So we're simply going to suggest that we'd like to implement this type of a program in Connecticut. There are still discussions ongoing about what the details are of the bill, and I don't want to posit that I know exactly what the bill is going to look like when all is said and done, but we just feel that this is a very important program that's going to help workers in the state of Connecticut and make Connecticut more competitive with our surrounding states.
Well, just so it doesn't scare people off, you're talking about people banking the money, or it is some kind of a payroll tax or something like that.
It would be something like that. I'm thinking about where the discussions were last year, and I think that's a starting point for where we're going to start this year.
Vacation,
Right.
You have to work over a period of years for the employer.
Correct. And I also want to stress that these are not the only three bills that we will be focusing on this year. These are simply three issues that we identified early on as really important to help the economy in the state of Connecticut, help workers in the state of Connecticut, and we're still working on developing a broader list of priorities and policies that we'd like to push.
Well, what about, on that point, what about revenue? Where are you guys, have you got any, you taking around any proposals outside of legalizing adult use of marijuana?
We'll be putting together some proposals closer to the session.
So did you all feel?
Can you give us an idea of what some of those proposals might entail?
We're still working on them.
Taxes and fees or something like that.
We're still working on the proposal, so I don't want to say anything other than what we're talking about here today.
Representative Hall was suggesting that the election wasn't about Trump, but it was about these issues. Did all of you hear from people that you campaigned to on these three issues?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
In great pluralities?
Yes. And I think that's borne out in the polls that suggest Connecticut residents support these three issues in particular with between 60 and 7% level of approval.
Could you respond to the argument that a $15 minimum wage and the regulations surrounding paid family leave would make Connecticut less business friendly?
If you look at our surrounding states, they're already looking to do these things. I think in many ways, the people that we're losing to other states tend to be younger people. And as I mentioned before, we know that 38% of millennials are willing to move to another state simply to be able to access a program like paid family medical leave. So I think if we're being worker friendly, we're being business friendly as well. And just to let everybody know, we have a number of co-sponsors and co-introducers for each of these bills. So that it's not just the people who are here today for minimum wage. We have 53 co-introducers. For paid family medical leave, we'll have 54. And for regulating the adult use of marijuana, we'll have 44 introducers.
Any Republican?
Not as of yet.
I'm sorry, it was 55 minimum wage, 54?
53 minimum wage, 54 paid leave, 44 regulating marijuana.
44 marijuana.
And,
You've got 46 caucus members?
Yes, that's right. 46 members of the Progressive Caucus at this point in time.
And a dozen are newly elected, or?
11 are incoming new members, yes. Any other questions?
I guess in terms of the paid family medical leave, what sort of benefits would that provide, or how long?
So again, those are still being devised. Does anybody recall last year where we ended up? I don't recall off the top of my head. I think it was at least I think it was around 4 to 6 weeks of benefits, and I think there was a cap And again, I don't recall the exact details, but I think there was a cap of a certain amount per week. Maybe it was $1,000. Although that sounds a little bit high. That was right.
Would you anticipate that since he advocated all three of these positions and talked about them on most of the televised debates, that Governor-elect Lamont might even propose these in his budget address in February?
Well, I would hope that he does. I know that he has spoken positively about these three issues, and I think he recognizes that there's a lot of support in the state for these three issues, and I hope that he does introduce them. But we plan to have some discussions with him and his team about that.
So not every member of the Progressive Caucus supports legalizing marijuana?
No, we went to each member of the House Democratic Caucus individually and asked for their support. So you won't necessarily see the same names on each bill.
Do any of these bills include the names Simowitz or Ritter?
Matt Ritter will be a co-introducer to all three.
Oh, really?
And getting back to the Republicans, are you going to be soliciting Republicans? Because obviously I think there's common ground, at least on marijuana.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to Republicans on these three issues in particular. Absolutely.
So that one seems to cross party lines a little bit. I mean, the minimum wage and paid family medical leave seem to be more partisan. But what conversations have you guys had that would indicate that the marijuana one could be a different issue politically?
Well, first of all, I think family medical leave is another issue that could have some bipartisan support. But I've had conversations with some folks on the Republican side of the aisle, and they have brought up some legitimate concerns that we're thinking about as well, including making sure that we don't set a price so high that there's still a robust black market. I think we want to make sure that we're eliminating or getting as close to eliminating a black market as best we can. So I think on issues like those are real conversations we can have with folks across the aisle to make sure we're implementing the best bill possible.
And how would it would have something in it to expunge records regarding marijuana convictions in the past?
That's what we would like to see. So we'll be pushing for that going forward. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.